All right, next question. For microcycle lengths, what do you think is too short and what do you think would be too long? So some definitions here, and then we can riff on this. So a microcycle is the smallest unit of a training cycle that is repeated. So it could be a day, for example, if all of your workouts are exactly the same. Maybe you're like a hyper specialized power lifter imagine you're running like a Shako program, a squat, bench, deadlift every single time, right? And now, to be fair, in those programs, you do alter intensities and stuff like that, but it's the same exercises, so that really wouldn't count. But imagine if it's just every single day, it's squat, bench, deadlift, 80% of your 1 rep max for the same number of sets and reps. Technically, your microcycle then would be a day long, and you just repeat it multiple times per week. More commonly, there are some beginner type programs where it's just 2 different workouts that are alternated. So in that case, the microcycle length is 2 days. And then most training, most of our programs, for example, are like a week long microcycle where you have a set amount of programming through the week, and that's repeated each week of the mesocycle, which is basically how long microcycles are repeated for until it's changed. This is also like a block, for example. So usually multiple weeks. And the last thing I'll talk about is the macrocycle, which is the long-term plan of mesocycles, which include all of those repeated units of training, which we call microcycles. The macrocycle typically is over a year, although for like Olympic athletes, it could be like a quadrennial, for example. If the question really is about microcycle length, so like what is too short and what is too long, I think that having like a 1-day microcycle where you just do the same workout every single time, I think for most people, that's going to be too short. My exception is that if somebody's training like once a week, for example, and that's the only resistance training that they're doing, I could see a case for like a 1-day, sort of microcycle. It's not great, but it's certainly better than not, So I'm imagining if my dad at some point is like, look, man, I can lift 1 day a week. What do you want me to do? And I give him the same 3 exercises. That's not probably how I would program it, but I could see if he was like, I just prefer these 3 or 4 or whatever it is. I'm doing these in perpetuity. I'm like, all right, I guess your microcycle's a day. I have stronger opinions, though, of how, what is it, too long of a microcycle. I've definitely programmed stuff where a microcycle is really like 2 weeks long, where people are like alternating things, every other week. And so the actual microcycle, instead of being 1 week, it's 2 weeks. But I started thinking about sport, like CrossFit type programming. And if you went from like, all right, workout number 1 is push jerks, 5 heavy singles, right? And then workout 309, that's when you finally get back to push jerks for 5 singles, and you're repeating the thing all over again. To me, that's too long of a microcycle. It's too much randomization, and you've spread out your ability to adapt too far. That's kind of how I'd feel about that. I don't think, though, that this is what the person's asking. I think they're actually asking about like how long should a block of training last? What is too short and what is too long? And that I actually have a better answer for, I think. Most of the time, an actual training block, so not a deload block, not a pivot, not a low stress, not like an injury rehab type approach. I think for most people, a mesocycle is going to last somewhere between 3 to 8 weeks on average. If it's a bad program, like or somebody blows up initially and it's just not working, they hate it, whatever, it could be shorter, but you're doing that in response to some feedback that you're getting. Similarly, the mesocycle, the block, could be longer if somebody's off to the races and they're just killing it for, maybe 10 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. I haven't had people go for much further than that unless we've done some significant modification within the training program, in which case it's not the same mesocycle. So you got to cut it. So most of your training blocks, I think, should be somewhere between like 3 to 8 weeks long, and you should plan on at least having an option to change sometime as you get closer to the end there. The reasons for you needing to change usually come down to 3 major categories. One is logistics. So like your time availability to train has dramatically changed, for example, or your goals dramatically change. You're going to a meet, for example, or you have to, it's in season now. Your preferences. That's another reason to change your training mesocycle, right? Someone could be getting great results from a particular training program. It's for like hypertrophy, say, and now they want to, prep for a powerlifting meet. Well, you have to change your mesocycle. So it's another reason to change. And then the last one is stagnation. As people's results sort of peter out. They become accommodated and accustomed to the training block, and they stop making sort of gains. That's another indicator to change things up. Injury would be a fourth category, perhaps. So that's what I think about when I think about mesocycle length. Like, what is the optimal mesocycle length? I'm thinking somewhere 3 to 8 weeks, changing it if you need to, if you want to, or if the program is no longer working for you. That's pretty much, those are the reasons. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, there's little that I would take issue with in your answer. I think that I would even broaden a little bit up front to where if somebody had a set session that they really enjoyed and they habitually trained twice a week and they didn't have super high performance aspirations and they just wanted to do the same session twice a week, I'd be like, well, again, compared with doing less or doing nothing, like, I'm down with that. I think that if we start doing the same session even more frequently than that, I start to have a little bit more concerns about like overuse syndromes and things like that, right? But if somebody wants to SBD twice a week, within reason, I'm like, cool, I'm even fine with that. So I also do like it for my own training, for some of the folks that I've been working with, spreading them out across a 2-week repeating cycle to introduce a little bit more variation, not only to, again, mitigate some of that overuse risk, but also just to break people out of the mindset of like, I have to beat last week's numbers every single week, since we know that once you're trained to a certain level, that adaptation to the point of, true strength gains doesn't necessarily happen on a weekly basis or that quickly. And so giving people a little bit more time to adapt and like kind of shake out the rust of normal ups and downs of training week to week can be useful. So, and I would have no problem even stretching it to 3 weeks or something like that. Going much longer than that, then you start to be like, okay, is this just a separate training block? But repeating cycles of a week, of 2 weeks, of 3 weeks, I'm down with any of that.
Yeah, I like that. For more on how to program, our low fatigue ebook is pretty much our current meditation on programming. So if you want to check that out, got a lot of information there on how to program, how to troubleshoot, and so on and so forth.